My name is Clara, and I'm 34 years old. I've spent most of my adult life believing that if you worked hard, if you did everything right, the world would eventually notice, that people would see your dedication, your precision, your quiet discipline, and somehow, that would be enough. It wasn't. The first time I realized that truth, I was sitting in a glass-walled boardroom on the 27th floor of a corporate tower that always smelled faintly of printer, toner, and ambition. It was the kind of place where smiles were currency, and silence was often mistaken for weakness. I was the silent one. Across the room, under the filtered glow of fluorescent lights, stood Emma. She was the kind of woman who could charm a thunderstorm into sunshine. Her smile arrived before her, bright and polished. She had a way of leaning in just enough, laughing at the right moments, touching someone's arm in a way that felt personal but never inappropriate. The executives loved her for it. And that morning, as she glided between them, all laughter and gloss, she was about to present my project, my masterpiece, to the entire leadership team. I sat in the corner, hands folded, pulse steady. On the outside, I looked calm, professional, invisible. On the inside, I was watching a thief approach the altar with my work in her hands. She thought this was her moment. What she didn't know was that I had already rewritten the ending. The project was called Chimera, an AI-driven logistics model that would overhaul our entire supply chain management system. It was the kind of innovation that could define a career. My career. For 4 months, I lived inside that code. My apartment became a graveyard of coffee cups and scribbled diagrams. I'd fall asleep on the couch with my laptop still glowing against the dark. I'd wake up with lines of Python looping in my dreams. I remember the night the model finally worked. It was 3 a.m. I was alone in the office. Barefoot. My hair a mess. The servers hummed around me like a heartbeat. The code compiled without a single error. When the final dataset aligned perfectly, I laughed out loud, a raw, disbelieving sound that echoed across empty cubicles. That was the moment I knew I'd created something extraordinary. And I also knew no one would see it the way I did not in this place. Not when people like Emma existed. She was the visible kind of brilliant, the kind executives adored. She said things like leveraging synergistic disruption, and people nodded like it meant something. I built the engine. She polished the hood ornament. At first, I didn't mind. I told myself there was room for both of us. But slowly, I began to notice how meetings changed. When I presented, the manager, Mark, would wave his hand mid-sentence. Great. Clara. We'll circle back to the technicals later. Then he'd turn to Emma. You've always got such big-picture energy. What's your take? And she'd flash that perfect smile and toss out a word salad of buzzwords that meant nothing and everything. They loved her for it. Each time, I shrank a little more into my chair, invisible beneath my own accomplishments. 3 days before the big presentation, I overheard her. I had walked past Mark's office, heading for the break room, when I heard her voice, and of course, Emma was saying, I was up all night finalizing the AI model. It was a beast, but I finally cracked it. For a second, my brain didn't process the words. I froze in the hallway, fingers tightening around the plastic cup in my hand. Then she began describing line for line my own findings, my algorithms, my conclusions. My blood went cold. Mark's voice followed, dripping with admiration. Incredible work. Emma, the VP's going to be blown away. Something inside me cracked quietly, cleanly, not like glass, but like ice finally breaking after too much weight. I walked away before they could see me. I went straight to the 3rd floor restroom, the one nobody used, and locked myself inside. My reflection stared back at me, pale and shaking. My throat felt raw. My eyes stung, but no tears came. I had cried before, countless times, over smaller things. But not this time. This time, I didn't break down. I didn't scream. I didn't beg the universe to be fair. Instead, I looked at myself and whispered, "They left you no way to fight fair. So don't." That night, I sat at my desk in my apartment. The glow of the monitor, the only light in the room. The hum of the city below was a dull, distant rhythm. On the screen, Project Chimera stared back at me. 32 slides of flawless logic. Intricate graphs. Predictive modeling that had taken months to perfect. And I began to build something new, not from scratch, but from strategy. I saved the reel, a final version of the project, onto a silver USB drive, its surface catching the faint reflection of my desk lamp. Every slide was perfect. Every figure double-checked. Every piece of data airtight. Then, I turned my attention to the company's shared drive, the one Emma would use. I opened the older version of the presentation from a week ago. It looked nearly complete enough to fool anyone, glancing at it, but the data wasn't verified. Key formulas were missing, and half the charts were still labeled placeholder. I smiled. The first real smile in days. I added one final touch. A few believable slides that seemed accurate at first glance, but contained deliberate inconsistencies that would unravel under even mild scrutiny. The kind that only someone who truly understood the project could explain. Then I saved it back onto the server. My trap was set. Finally, I composed an email to Ben, the data analyst who had always quietly championed my work. The subject line read, "Final Backup, Project Chimera. Hey Ben, just finished the final deck for tomorrow. Attaching a password-protected copy just in case. My nerves are shot. Haha. Talk tomorrow. Clara." I hit send. The timestamp became my alibi proof of ownership. Proof of truth. Then I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. For the first time in months. I felt calm. Cold. Maybe. But steady. The kind of calm that comes when you've already accepted the cost of your choices. I looked out the window at the city skyline. The buildings like glittering chess pieces. And whispered to no one. "Your move, Emma." The morning of the presentation. The office buzzed with anticipation. The executives were already in the boardroom, coffee cups steaming. Small talk floating like fog. I took my usual seat in the corner. Hands folded in my lap. Emma walked in wearing a cream blazer and a smile bright enough to light the room. She gave me a brief, pitying glance as if I were the ghost of her competition. She plugged in her laptop. The lights dimmed. "Good morning, everyone," she began. The first few slides were fine title page. Agenda. Summary. She was reading my words, line for line. And then, she clicked to slide 5. The chart that appeared was a mess of placeholder text. Insert Q3 logistics data here. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. She tried to recover, forcing a laugh. A small technical issue. But the data shows. She clicked again. The next slide blank. Then another. And another. The room fell silent. You could hear the hum of the projector fan. From the head of the table, the VP of Strategy, Ms. Albright, leaned forward, voice sharp and calm. "Ms. Davis," she said, "this appears to be an incomplete draft. The pre-read packet I received mentioned a functional Python model. Does that exist? Must it." Her face pale now. "Yes, I mean, of course. It's just..." "Ms." Albright looked down at her notes. "It says here that Clara Anderson was the lead data analyst on that model. Ms. Anderson, perhaps you can shed some light." All eyes turned to me. I rose. Slow and steady. My pulse, a key drum in my ears. "Yes," I said. "I can..." From my pocket, I pulled the silver USB drive, and as I walked to the front of the room, I realized something. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. I plugged in the drive, and the screen came alive with precision, color, and truth. My truth. Clara stood in the boardroom, her own slides glowing behind her. The air so still she could hear the soft whir of the projector fan. Her heart was beating too fast, but her voice stayed even. As you can see, she said, Chimera's predictive algorithm increases efficiency by 42%. The executives leaned forward. Even Miss Albright, who rarely showed emotion, gave a single approving nod. Questions came about data accuracy, model reliability, security. Clara answered each one without hesitation, explaining logic, citing variables, walking them through code she knew by heart. She could feel Emma beside the door, shrinking smaller with each answer. The applause at the end wasn't loud, but it was real. When the meeting ended, Ms. Albright stood. Excellent work. Ms. Anderson, we'll be in touch. People filed out. Emma cornered her near the exit, voice trembling. Why did you do that to me? Clara met her eyes, calm as glass. I didn't do anything to you. I just showed them the truth. Then she left the room. Afterward, the office felt different. People who once walked past her now paused to say, good job. Even Mark couldn't meet her eyes. 2 weeks later, a company-wide email announced Emma's resignation. When Clara opened her inbox that evening, she found a note on her keyboard. You were right. Nothing more. She folded it, slid it into her drawer, and sat for a long moment in the dim light. 6 months later, the world outside the office windows had changed from winter gray to the pale blue of early summer. Clara sat in a new chair, in a new office, one with a view that reached all the way to the river. Ms. Albright had kept her promise. Clara was now the official lead for the national rollout of Project Chimera. But success didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like quiet air returning to lungs that had forgotten how to breathe. Some nights she still stayed late. The hum of the servers, her only companion. She'd think of Emma then not with hatred, not even with triumph, but with a kind of distant pity. Because she understood now people like Emma always chase light. They don't realize how powerful it is to be the one who builds it. One evening, long after most of the floor had gone dark, Ben stopped by her desk. He leaned against the doorway, holding 2 paper cups of tea. Still working, he asked. Just checking the new model. He smiled. You know, the funny thing is, I never doubted this would happen. Everyone else saw you as quiet. I saw the storm. She laughed softly. A quiet storm. Maybe. He set 1 cup beside her and nodded toward the window. You earned this view. When he left, she turned her chair toward the city. The skyline shimmered under the weight of dusk, glass and steel turning gold. In her reflection, she saw not the invisible woman in the corner anymore, but someone rebuilt. Weeks later, she found herself speaking at a conference, presenting Chimera to a room full of strangers. As she clicked through the slides, explaining her design, she noticed a woman in the front row taking notes with fierce concentration. The woman caught her eye afterward and smiled, nervous, admiring. You made me believe I could do this, she said. Clara thanked her quietly. But later, on the flight home, those words echoed louder than the applause. It wasn't revenge that lasted. It was the legacy that came after. On her desk at home sat a single memento, a small, folded note with 3 words. You were right. She kept it not as a trophy, but as a compass. A reminder that the loudest voices aren't always the truest. That integrity doesn't need an audience. Some nights, when the city hums beneath her window and her laptop glows in the dark, she opens a blank document and begins to write not code this time, but stories. Stories about people like her. The quiet ones who build the world, while others take credit. She writes because she wants them to know the truth, always finds a microphone. Sometimes it just takes a little longer to plug it in. If this story spoke to you, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or had someone try to steal what you built, remember this. Your worth isn't in the recognition. It's in the resilience that brought you here. Thank you for listening to my story. Please like, share, and subscribe for more real, heartfelt stories about betrayal, courage, and quiet revenge. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to let your work speak for you?